Between 1950 and 1953, Korea faced complete devastation. Most of the destruction fell on the north, with cities leveled and thousands dead as a result of firebombing and indiscriminate carpet bombing. Pyongyang was leveled, along with many other cities across the country. Railway lines, roads, factories, houses, schools, and hospitals were left either destroyed or completely unusable. Pre-war Korea, for all intents and purposes, was no more. How did the country recover? What is the Chollima Movement? And how has Korea changed from 1950 to today? The Korean peninsula was liberated on the 15th of August 1945 with the surrender of the Japanese and the demand that they relinquish their imperial colonies. On August 24th, the northern half of Korea, which had been liberated by anti-Japanese revolutionaries fighting alongside the Soviet Red Army, was put under the administration of the Soviet Civil Administration. On the 25th of August 1948, the first Supreme People's Assembly was elected, followed by the formal founding of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and the departure of Soviet forces from the peninsula in December that same year. However, in June 1950, conflict returned to Korea.
조선전쟁 51년 8월 18일부터 모험적인 파기 및 추기 공세를 감행해왔습니다.
As the war progressed through the 1950s, the UN command adopted a policy of bombing any city held by the enemy, either conventionally or with firebombs. This strategy was marketed to the public as strategic bombing, and the US claimed its forces were only targeting military infrastructure and installations, although in reality little was done to distinguish military from civilian. This came to a head in November, when permission was given to burn the cities of Sinŭiju and Kangye in the north of the country, and latterly stated that every installation and village in North Korea now becomes a military and tactical target. This was a de facto order to begin indiscriminate bombing against civilian targets as well as military infrastructure. Far from protecting local Koreans, the only exceptions to the order were strikes on hydroelectric plants to prevent provoking Beijing, and the city of Najin, due to its proximity to the Soviet Union. MacArthur reportedly said, in response to the suggestion of striking the city of Kangye, "Burn it if you so desire. Not only that, but burn and destroy as a lesson any other of those towns that you consider of military value to the enemy." The policy only continued as UN forces were pushed south, being forced to abandon many key cities as they retreated towards the 38th parallel. On December 30th, the UN command ordered that Pyongyang, Wonsan, Hamhung, and Hungnam should be destroyed, now that UN forces had withdrawn and they were in the hands of the Korean and Chinese People's Armed Forces. By the end of the bombing campaign, the term military target had grown to encompass almost any building north of the front line, a reality which becomes painfully clear with the statistics. Pyongyang was 75% destroyed during the bombings, Hamhung 80%, Wonsan 80%, and Sariwon 95%, not to mention the destruction of almost all infrastructure linking the DPRK's villages, towns and cities. The Chollima Movement encouraged workers and citizens of the DPRK to work at the speed of Chollima to rebuild the shattered country. So, what is Chollima? What does it mean? Well, Chollima literally means 1000 Ri horse, Ri being a traditional Korean unit of measurement equaling roughly 0.4 kilometers, and Chollima is a mythical winged horse which is able to travel 1000 Ri in a single day. The Chollima movement really took hold in the mid-1950s in the form of a Stakhanovite movement, that being a mass movement encouraging progress and hard work with ideology and pride, which takes its name from the USSR's Alexei Stakhanov, a coal miner who took pride in his ability to surpass quotas and work harder and more efficiently than was required. In 1950s DPRK, workers were awarded for their individual merit, eventually resulting in the inauguration of many model workers and model working brigades, meant to serve as examples to others. Eventually, this led to a new class of Chollima workers, those who had achieved Chollima awards or the status of model worker. And it was this movement which swept the country throughout the 1950s and 60s to repair and rebuild both the national economy and the physical country itself. Immediately after the ceasefire in 1953, it wasn't just the economy, or the ideology of the country which needed attending to, but the physical buildings, roads, railways, villages, towns and cities which made up the Democratic People's Republic of Korea were all but gone. The rebuilding of Korea was seen by many nations in the socialist bloc as a fraternal socialist project. In the immediate aftermath of the Korean War, the USSR, China, and East Germany were amongst the largest donators of aid to Pyongyang. However, with the growth of the economy under the 5-year plan, aid was not necessary for long. As the country got back on its feet, aid money decreased rapidly from 33% of state revenue in 1954 to almost nothing by 1960. Korean architects, city planners, engineers, and construction workers could then get to work redesigning the DPRK cities in a new, socialist style, free from the constrictions of former city plans. You can see the freedoms this provided when you compare, say, Pyongyang, which was bombed heavily during the war, with Kaesong, which generally avoided much of the bombardment. If you want to find out more about this ancient city which was spared bombing and has been left intact for centuries, check out one of my Kaesong videos. Now, it would take a while to cover all of the cities in the DPRK, so let's take the biggest and best, Pyongyang, as an example of how the rubble and ruins of the Korean War were cleared away and a new, completely unique city built during the latter half of the 20th century, resulting in the capital we see today. The layout of central Pyongyang still existed, although many of the buildings and roads were severely damaged. In the 1950s, 2 new major roadways were constructed. The first, known today as Kaesonmun Street, ran from near Moranbong Park, today the site of the Arch of Triumph, to the northern outskirts of the city. Cheongmyeon Street ran parallel to the river through East Pyongyang, cutting through what was formerly the industrial district, originally home to the Japanese Nippon Oil Company and numerous other destroyed industrial complexes. In 1950, the Pyongyang Railway Station building was completed, along with the Central History Museum and Art Museum on Kim Il-sung Square. As the 1960s began, another major road project was undertaken, this time linking Kaesonmun Street with the road on the banks of the Potong River. During this decade, more notable buildings were built, including the Pyongyang Grand Theatre, the Oknyugan Restaurant, both in traditional Korean style, the Pyongyang Children's Palace, and the Chollima statue, built to commemorate the aforementioned Chollima Movement. As construction continued, new roads were built, stretching further and further out of the heart of Pyongyang. The region became more and more urbanized. For example, Mangyongdae, today a district of Pyongyang, used to be a small village outside the city, and the built-up area to the west of the Potong River didn't exist at all before the Korean War. The 1970s saw numerous new constructions hit the streets of Pyongyang. The Korean Revolution Museum, documenting the anti-Japanese struggle, was built on Mansu Hill, alongside the Mansudae Grand Monument. The Pyongyang Palace of Culture, April 25th House of Culture, and Mansudae Art Theatre were also distinctive additions to Pyongyang during the 1970s. Street construction persevered throughout this decade, continuing to cement the modern road network of Pyongyang that we know today. During the 1980s, Hwangbok Street, an ambitious street project with some of the capital's most distinctive architecture to date, was begun. And it was during the 1980s when many notable buildings arrived on the streets of Pyongyang. including the Grand People's Study House, the Pyongyang Ice Rink, the Mansudae Assembly Hall, Juche Tower, Arch of Triumph, Koryo Hotel, and Mayday Stadium. The Mayday Stadium was built on Nungna Island to host the 1989 World Festival of Youth and Students, and as such, Chongchun Street, known as Sports Street, was built in East Pyongyang, home to numerous sporting facilities, including a badminton centre, facilities for shooting, swimming, wrestling, handball, and much more. The 1990s saw the completion of Kwangbok Street, and an equally ambitious street in southern Pyongyang, Hongil Street. During the decade, the Three Revolutions exhibition was completed in northern Pyongyang, and the Workers' Party Foundation Monument was constructed on the eastern side of the Taedong River. The Victorious Fatherland Liberation War Monument was also constructed on the banks of the Pyongyang. Pyongyang in the 21st century has continued to expand, whether it be Changjon Street in 2012 or the supermodern Yongyong and Mirei streets in the 2010s. The 2020s haven't slowed down construction in the capital, with Songhua Street and the new Potonggang district completed in 2022, with the new Hwasong district in northeast Pyongyang due to be completed in the coming months. The city planning of modern socialist Pyongyang prioritizes key axes which run through the city. Whether it be the Juche Tower towering above the central square, the Workers' Party Monument sitting directly opposite the Mansudae Grand Monument on the other side of the Taedonggang, the mammoth supermodern Ryugyong Hotel being aligned with the ancient Potong Gate, or the direct line between the Pyongyang Grand Theatre running along Victory Street up to Moranbong Park, home to, amongst other things, the Liberation Tower. It would certainly be true to say Pyongyang has fully recovered from the 1950s bombing, which only left two modern buildings standing in the city. Cities across Korea underwent the same treatment as Pyongyang, with the exception of Kaesong, which continued to expand, but the ancient heart of the city remains. From Hamhung on the east coast, to Sinuiju on the northern border, and Cheongjin in the far northeast, all major cities in the DPRK are clearly well planned and designed along the same lines as many socialist cities across the world. Numerous green areas and public spaces, large squares, clear, wide boulevards, but with a distinctly Korean flair, which shines through both in its traditional architecture and in some of its more modern, avant-garde designs. Whilst the North was robbed of so much of its heritage during the brutal bombing of the 1950s, it also allowed the opportunity to design its cities truly from the ground up, resulting in a country that really is like no other. And this can all be traced back to the Chollima Movement. In the 1950s, it was imperative that the country be rebuilt as quickly as possible. And even today, when Midday Future Scientist Street was built on the banks of the Taedong River, it was completed within a year, or at Chollima speed. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed finding out a little bit more about the Chollima Movement and the rebuilding of Korea after the Korean War. As always, a special thank you to my patrons on Patreon for supporting the channel. You can find a link to that in the description if you want to help support the videos that I'm working on. And if you like the music from this video, check out DPRK Explained Music, where I'll be uploading all the songs I use in these videos.